with school safety and maybe even save lives. This year was a big year because it was a budget year. That was the focus. The General Assembly passes a budget every 2 years on even numbered years. So in odd numbered years, we have 30-day session. On even numbered years, it's a 60-day session. The executive branch budget, or House Bill 6, allocates more than $128 billion toward the operation of the executive branch for the next 2 fiscal years. We increased education funding, school safety funding, and funding state pensions, among other things. We also passed House Bill 1, which makes historic one-time investments in infrastructure and special projects by allocating $2.7 billion from the Budget Reserve Trust Fund, that's sometimes called the Rainy Day Fund. So this amount was up to $3.7 billion, and people were criticizing, like the legislators, why are you holding all this money? Why are we putting into this fund? We don't need that much money if there's a tornado or flood or an emergency. It's more than needed. So it was agreed that $2.7 billion was funded to a lot of projects. This includes $20 million for capital improvements at the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. And then also another one that's local is the Children's Home in Northern Kentucky. They're located in Covington, and then they've got the location out on Idlewild Road, the Children's Home. So they're getting $6 million for just the total renovation. The road plan was a big deal. All of us were wanting to be fully involved and engaged in that and to advocate for our area. The biennial road construction plan for the next 2 years was House Bill 266. This bill allocates over $136 million toward road projects here in District 66. And a similar amount, I think $137 million in Southern Boone County. So there's roughly $4 million dedicated to converting a Burlington Pike to a super street. Have any of you heard of that? Super street. A super street. I think it will avoid a lot of crisscrossing traffic and gives people the opportunity to do U-turns. So it's just a nickname that they have for this kind of design, is a super street. And $1.6 million will go towards reducing congestion on Limaberg Road from Conrad to 18. Most of the planned road projects are related to safety and congestion improvements on highways and the interstate, like paving, widening, installing guardrails, that kind of thing. For commuters, the Brent Spence Bridge was addressed. The General Assembly allocated $655 million was needed toward keeping the Brent Spence project going, to match the federal funds. We are still at least 5 years away from that project being completed. In January, we adopted House Resolution 57, which urges Governor Beshear to support Texas Governor Greg Abbott and the state of Texas efforts to secure the southern border. The resolution makes it clear that we stand in solidarity with Texas, its National Guard, its Department of Public Safety, and its lawful authority to secure the border. We also passed 2 constitutional amendments this year that will appear on the ballot in November. What's the one constitutional amendment we got coming?
School choice.
School choice. The constitutional amendment is just passed with a majority. It doesn't need a governor's signature. So House Bill 2, if you vote yes on this proposed constitutional amendment, it will give the General Assembly the ability to provide financial support for the education of students outside of the system of common schools. And common means public, outside of the public schools. So I've got the wording on the bill that was written. So if anybody wants to see me after this, if they're curious, I've got the wording for that constitutional amendment. And then the second amendment, constitutional amendment, will be on the ballot. Is if you vote yes on this proposed amendment, it will change our state constitution to clarify that only U.S. citizens can vote in elections. And what's important about this is that it's already the case, but this is for every level. So some local district can't change and say we're going to let everybody vote if they legally vote. So this is from the bottom up. So local, county, city elections. It's for everybody, so we want it ingrained in our Constitution. So the interim period begins in June. This is where the House and Senate committees meet, come together once a month through November. This last year was through December, to discuss issues and potential legislation for the next legislative session. They were called interim joint committees. So I was on education, judiciary, and state government. So in the summer, they're just called interim committee for state government, etc. Special and statutory committees also meet throughout the interim. So there's work being done year-round. A lot of meetings, depending on what committees you're on. So we often hear from different government agencies, nonprofits, and members of the public and other stakeholders on what we need to do to focus on improving our state during this time. We value and appreciate the input and collaboration, and so you're welcome to join in that conversation. I know like Sherry Bradley emails a lot down there and lets us know what bills she wants passed. So that's good. And so the 2025 legislative session will begin at noon on January 7th. The Kentucky General Assembly's website is legislature.ky.gov, and it's got drop downs. You can look at the 2024 session, you can look at the 2023 session. There's all kinds of stuff on there. You can see how you can actually watch committee hearings. It's got a ton of information. All right, so I can take a couple of questions if you want. If you have any questions on the bills that I covered or that I haven't covered. Does anybody have any questions? I was expecting a couple questions. Here, I'll tell you another bill. Oh, okay. TJ.
What's a bill that didn't move this session that you are going to try to fight for in 2025?
Oh, thank you. I filed 14 bills, and none of them went through. Steve Doan, the same, about 14, none of them went through. The people at the top do their best to constrain conservative voices. We can't get anything to move forward. So I had House Bill 47 was my religious liberty bill. So 30 states have Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRAs, and so it wasn't asking too much, but it got listed on the orders of the day, which means it was going to be heard in the chamber, and it sat there for about 10 days and didn't get moved ahead. And the thing that's frustrating down there is they won't tell you why. They won't give you an explanation. They won't tell you who's stopping it, who's behind it, why, what the issue is, and they won't tell you what you can do to move it ahead. They will not communicate with you down there. So that's what we're up against. That's one thing you were getting at, TJ.
On the infrastructure road projects about bridge, Assistant DFC this week in Chevron High was talking about the bridge. Is that part of this?
I missed her. I didn't get to hear it, but no, I don't know that it is.
She indicated that there was.
Did she mean by the Brent Spence Bridge?
She indicated there was money set aside.
Oh, I'm sorry. She said that there was money allocated to a new bridge.
I imagine that's what she was talking about.
Part of that.
Yeah, because it's going to be a companion bridge, so it will be an all-new bridge.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's where the $655 million is
Okay.
going toward. Yeah. So the through traffic will be on the one bridge, and the local traffic will be on the other bridge. Anything else? I'll give you one more that was good. House Bill 357, the Second Amendment Privacy Act passed into law. This bill protects the privacy and sensitive financial information of people purchasing firearms and ammunition in Kentucky. So it prohibits the use of a firearm code and preventing financial institutions with colluding with the government to target citizens for exercising their Second Amendment rights. So that's been a problem with the financial institutions, what they're doing now. They're attaching a code so they watch and they can monitor. It's just the thing we don't want. We try to fight bills down there we probably accomplish more by helping to kill bad bills than we do in passing bills. So we are always doing that. Like a central bank digital currency. Last year we stopped a really bad bill. It was about the Uniform Commercial Code, and they had language in there that would allow for central bank digital currency. And so we killed it. We had enough opposition in our committee. You got to do it in the committee room get enough people on the committee to be against it. And so it didn't get heard. This year, there's another version that passed. So it's a constant battle. The bill's not as bad this year as it was last year. But it's just a constant battle. They never give up down there on what they want. So it's just year after year, you just gotta keep fighting. So anyway, that's it. Just can't give up. We gotta keep fighting. Okay, thank you.
Number one, what can we do to get leadership to start listening? Because it wasn't just you and Steve Dillon, Mary Ann Proctor's bills weren't getting out there, everybody. They're disenfranchising Northern Kentucky. And how is leadership chosen in Frankfurt?
Well, they're voted on by the members. So really the only way to ultimately save this is through elections, and electing more people that are conservative, liberty, constitutional, care about the people back home and aren't answering to like the bourbon industry or the gaming industry or Churchill Downs and all those people that flood us. The top two lobbyists are the Chamber of Commerce and then the ACLU. And then I think the League of Cities is in the top 5. And they have power, they've got great power. But there are some bills that when people, okay, and here I'll give you an example, and I'll just be transparent about this one. Autonomous vehicles, House Bill 7. So I voted for it because I see this as in the future, it's gonna happen. They already use self-driving cars, vehicles in the airport, at CDG. And so I voted yes. And then the governor vetoed it. And before it came back, there was over 40 or 50 people in my district, in this district, that were against it. Said, please vote no, please vote no, please vote no. And so I and some others voted no, even though we were proponents of it earlier on. So your voice can make a difference. So I don't want to ever say it doesn't. So it can make a difference if there's enough of you, and we hear enough of that. And leadership, there's one bill that died that I was against, Proctor, Doan, Maddox, all of us were against House Bill 509, which would have destroyed the Open Records Act. And they got so much flack. They're probably going to come back with that one again, but they got so much against it that it did not get called for a vote on the last day. When we went in there, I thought it would be on the board, it would get voted on, and they dropped it. So we were successful in killing that. So that was a really bad one. But the legislators don't want their personal text being viewed, like if their daughter has a birthday, where to pick up the cake, and they don't want that. But what happens is that on our devices, people do work on their devices. So we do work on the devices. So it's hard to separate that line. So they're working on it. Maybe they'll come up with something that's fair, preserves our Open Records Act. Okay, anything else?
You guys hear me? My name's Chet Hand. I'm one of your county commissioners. I definitely appreciate Steve working on the firearms privacy bill, but I buy all mine in cash by Walmart, so it doesn't really impact me that much. I also want to specifically recognize Boone County Sheriff's Office here. Thanks for coming out, and Judge McCardle. So we have a couple others. One of the things before we get into projects and stuff, because that's my thing here, I wanted to bring up a couple things. First off, there's a bunch of files out there in the back. If you didn't grab a copy of each, you probably should go get one, because that's what we're going to be walking through. A number of different handouts. Secondly, we're going to hit some of these projects and things at a high level, and we're not going to get into too much detail on them. If you do have detailed questions, by all means reach out. I always answer my phone, text, and email. All my contacts info back there, info's back there, and I can get that info for you. Or any other projects that we don't talk about tonight as well. Also, we're going to hit a bunch of the projects that are ongoing in the area, and I have detailed files on these, some of them 500-600 pages long. So what I have for you is a download link. If you're interested in getting into the detail of any specific project, send me an email and I'll send you a download link with that file, and you can just download everything. So in your spare time, you can read up on it. One thing I'd like to talk about here before we get started is the collaboration between local and state government. So I think here in Boone County, we generally have a pretty conservative area, and we have generally pretty good collaboration between local government and state government. But Steve Rawlings hit on a point which I think is really important for all of you guys to recognize. You personally are being disenfranchised in Frankfurt right now by the leadership in the House and the Senate. The leadership in the House and the Senate despise you as an individual, period. You can quote me on that. They do not care what you think, and they are only listening to all the special interest groups down there. It is imperative that you contact them, reach out to them, and make sure that they are getting your representatives' bills heard. Because you all think, and all of us think, hey, I send my representative down there, they're gonna write good legislation, or they're gonna kill bad legislation, they're gonna do all this work for me. But there are 5 people down there that can decide whether or not your representative can even do their job or not. And that is wrong. You need to let them know that that's wrong, and you need to let them know to listen to your representatives. I'm calling it retaliatory politics. They're just pissed that there was a change in the guard in 2022. And they're being petty, and like petty children, they are taking it out on you instead of working with the new representatives. Chamber of Communism is another one. They sent an email out here recently, and I responded back to them directly and said, hey, why are you guys saying that that we need a change in Northern Kentucky's representation? And their response back, this is Tammy Wilson, who's, by the way, his husband is the biggest lobbyist in Frankfurt, and said, well, Northern Kentucky was severely harmed in 2022 when our legislators were changed. And I said, well, maybe you should give them a chance and work with them. So I think it's important that you guys get involved in that, because a lot of people just think, hey, my representatives are down there and they're there to do work for me, but realistically they're getting hamstrung by leadership. Stalls all of our legislation we're trying to do. And the way I phrase it is, it's the people versus the political elites and special interest groups. So that's what it is. A couple things here. In the last year, some things that I've tried to work on at the fiscal court. Actually, show of hands, and it's okay. Does anybody not even know what the fiscal court is? Let's start with that. Okay, good. Everybody knows what it is. So your local government is the fiscal court. That's your 3 commissioners and judge executive. One of the things that I pushed for in our strategic planning session last year was a communication strategy for the county. Luckily, the other commissioners agreed to work on that. We have implemented a new communication strategy for the county. And the idea behind it was that, in general, people in Boone County feel like the county is not being open and transparent or communicating well enough with the average citizen. So part of our communication strategy was an evaluation of what our current communication methods are, what technology are we utilizing today, and what exists out there that we could utilize. What type of communication are people looking for, meaning topic, and how do they want to get it, and on what frequency. So that evaluation's been done. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement, but there are a lot more ways for you as an average person to be informed about what's going on in the county. I consider that a win. Again, you can always be better. You can always work on or improve things. We'll continue to work on that. Another one that I have done at least twice now is very specifically push back on the local government purchase of additional land. It's my opinion that land should be privately owned. I don't think the government should own it much, if any. I get it, you have to have some. But on 2 occasions when we considered the purchase of additional county land, I was able to articulate and argue with the other commissioners that only if we sell something else that we already have. So that was the case. I think that's going to be my go-forward position for the most part, especially when it comes to things like buildings or raw land, like parks and things like that, that have potential to be sold in the future. The biggest one, comprehensive land use plan. Right now, the comprehensive land use plan is currently being evaluated by the long-term planning committee of the planning commission. And this document, we're currently operating off something called the 2040 comprehensive land use plan. The 2045 one is the one we're working on, and that document identifies how our land is going to be used going forward. When somebody purchases a piece of land and they decide I want to build something on it, or I want to change the zoning of it in order to be able to do something with it, I want to take my 200-acre farm and turn it into a logistics building, they have to go through the planning commission, and the First thing the planning commission does is they evaluate, is it or is it not consistent with our future land use plan? If it's not consistent with the future land use plan, it's much harder for them to get an approval. I'm bringing this up because right now, while we're evaluating the 2045 revision, this is the time for you and everyone else you know to have input on what you want the future of your county to look like. All these projects we're going to talk about, and all the projects that half of you have probably been in the fiscal court fighting in the last couple of years or more, when you show up in the fiscal court to fight this stuff, it is almost too late. The time to stop these things or have input on these things or set the trajectory for the growth of your county is in this comprehensive land use plan. Right now, they're evaluating what's called the goals and objectives. There are 112 current goals and objectives in the comprehensive land use plan. I provided a lot of feedback on it. They reduced it down to, I think, 62 now, so they basically cut it in half. I think it should be about 10, personally. And then from there, they're going to work on what they consider to be the elements, which are more tactical. And then they're going to start drafting the overall map and what do we think the density and things like that are going to look like in our county. You can have input on that in a few ways. There is, I think it's mybooncounty.org. I don't remember, but I can definitely send it out. mybooncounty.org is our plan, and you can go in there and actually provide feedback by goal and objective digitally through that website. You can also send an email directly to the Planning Commission with their addresses on one of those pages I gave you. And you can let them know what your thoughts are on it. That, I cannot stress how important that is. The other thing is, and I'm talking with the Planning Commission currently, is that when projects are coming up and being evaluated by the Planning Commission, what I observe most of the Planning Commission meetings, I either watch replays or I watch remotely or I go or sit in the back room and listen. And I find that we approve almost every exception that's requested. The Planning Commission does. And we have I think we have a fundamental misunderstanding at the Planning Commission level on the purpose of our plan. I'm a property rights person, and I think the government should not be able to tell you what you can and can't do with your property. And that means if I want to build a logistics warehouse, I should be allowed to do that. If I want to build apartments, I should be allowed to do that, etc. The difference is that 60 years ago, we decided we don't agree with that as a community, and we created a planning commission, we created a set of zoning laws and a zoning map establishing zoning districts within our county. That has been the case for 60 years, and the majority of people that have bought land in Boone County bought it knowing what they were zoned, knowing what everybody around them was zoned, and knowing what the future zoning was intended to be. So even though the government is technically telling you what you can and can't do with your land through the zoning laws, they have also, everybody that's bought land has also done it in an educated fashion theoretically. They know what those things are and they agreed to it when they bought their property. So in my opinion, if you have a piece of land and it's zoned a certain way and you want to do something and it's allowed under that zoning, my position is, whether I agree with the project or not, you should be allowed to do it. This is how I evaluate projects on this board. If it's allowed under your zoning, you should be allowed to do it, and nobody, including your neighbors, should be able to tell you that you can't. The flip side is, if you're asking to change the zoning on your property, I think that all of your neighbors' opinions matters more, because they made financial investment decisions based on the zoning of your land. There's no way to know in the future that you're going to try to change it. So I think their opinion weighs more. If all your neighbors are fine, great. If they're not, tough luck. You should have bought a piece of land that was zoned whatever you want to do. The other thing with that is that the plan in itself and our zoning laws are intrinsically restrictive in nature, in my opinion. So this is where I think the Planning Commission has a fundamental misunderstanding of their responsibility. The Planning Commission looks at the planning document as a document that allows certain things. I see it as a document that restricts certain things. So when they look at the goals and objectives, the Planning Commission will always come in, the staff will present a 500-page report, and they'll say, this project meets one or more of the 120 goals and objectives. But I've never once heard the Planning Commission ask, well, how many goals and objectives are they in contradiction with or in conflict with? Because there's 120 of them, and every single project that I look at, has been in conflict with one or more of them every single time. In my opinion, as a restricted document, those should be given more weight than the ones that allow somebody to do something. So I'm working with the planning commission to try to get them to rethink how they look at these projects that come through. And my incentive to do that is that Boone County's been growing for a long time. We're one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing county in the state. In the last 30 years, we've sustained a growth trajectory like this. We've had the land and the space and everything to do it, but as everybody can tell, it's getting tight, traffic's getting bad, and I think that our growth trajectory needs to look a little bit more like this. It's not that we're not growing, it's not that we're not building, it's not that we're not promoting industry, etc., but we're being just a little bit more careful about how we improve and evaluate projects that come through, because for two reasons. One, the planning commission has no idea what is too much of anything. They can't answer that question. And nothing within our entire process of evaluation of land use and projects in our county, nowhere in there is there a single quantifiable metric that they can use to evaluate. Not a single one. Nowhere in our goals and objectives, nowhere in our elements of our plan, and nowhere in the staff process for evaluation. So going into the 2045 comp plan, I'm asking that the planning commission consider the question, how much is too much of something? Could be anything. Too many houses, too many roads, too many traffic lights, too many coffee shops. And the planning commission thinks it's a dumb question, but the example I use is, if every single piece of land in the county was a coffee shop, would we have too many? Obviously, yes. So we agree on that. Now it's just a matter of where we draw the line. We agree that there is possibly too much of something, if anything. We just gotta figure out where we draw the line. Comes to quantifiable metrics. The other thing is we have no quantifiable targets. Like with our housing, we have a housing shortage. We need more housing. But do we want to have 50% $500,000 houses or above? Do we want 50% apartments? Do we want 25% apartments? What are those numbers? We should at least establish a goal that we think is reasonable within our county based on infrastructure and everything else. And then when we evaluate projects that come up, it should be evaluated against that metric. If we say we want 25% apartments in our county, or 10%, or 50%, when the planning commission evaluates individual projects right now, they have no way of knowing if we've exceeded that or not. So there's no metrics to evaluate against. Those two things are the most important things I think need to be in the comp plan going forward. A couple other things before I get into the project. I want to address two things that have come up on the fiscal report recently, and I've taken a little bit of heat for them. And one of them is the Boone County Transportation Improvement District, the TID. So Boone County was the first county in the state to implement something called a TID. It's a board. It's called SPGE, a Special Purpose Government Entity. It has its own board, its own bylaws, and the purpose of it is to help facilitate funding of infrastructure projects, specifically road infrastructure projects within our county. I was opposed to that and voted against it for a couple of reasons. Not because I don't think we need infrastructure improvement. We 100% do. But I'm opposed to the formation of additional boards and commissions and extra bureaucratic layers of government. I think that those things can be handled already within local government, and I'm opposed to people making decisions that impact things like that aren't elected. So these boards and commissions, we have like 60 or 70 boards and commissions in our county that are full of unelected bureaucrats, and they have no accountability to you, the voter. And it's easy for the politicians to say, sorry, that wasn't me, that was this board or commission, without also saying that they're the ones that vote for those people. So I'm opposed to the formation of more. And the other thing, the big thing with the TID is allowed to accept private funding. And I think that's wrong. I think funding for infrastructure is government responsibility, and I think in terms, if you take the holistic view of the comp plan, SD1 long-term sewer planning, and the internal knowledge of the projects that TID's going to be going after, there's a group of very powerful people in our county that are privy to those three elements of information, which breeds the potential for a lot of conflict of interest and land speculation, and I think is wrong. And I don't think that people that have money should be able to come in and incentivize local government to promote growth in any direction. just because they're gonna make money off of it. So that's why I was opposed to that one. The other one is Kentucky Works. Because again, it's another just entity formed. I voted against that. First time we stopped it, on Tuesday it passed. One of the other commissioners changed their vote. But there's 36 other private and public entities in Northern Kentucky that have some element of workforce development within their charter, mission, or goals. And I think that before we create yet another one, which is typical government, hey, there's a problem, let's throw money and people at it, we should get one of those other groups to take on that leadership role first. It's just my opinion. So I just want to explain those two things, because again, I've got a little bit of heat for it, but those are two things that come up at a local government level. Last thing I'll mention before we get started with the projects is I try to send out a lot of stuff about specific projects and things going on in the county by email and social media. I hate social media, so I'm very bad about getting it out on there, but I do try to get something out by email like once a week at least. Sometimes I'll send it out more often. If you would like to be informed on what's going on, or you would like to know when there's opportunities for you to have meaningful input, then I highly recommend you sign up for my newsletter, which you can do on the county website, or you can get my card back there, or connect with me on Facebook or Twitter. So stress the word meaningful input, because you guys send me emails all the time, and that's great. I definitely read them and I respond to them, and I'll look at any projects that you have or issues that you have. But the way our local government processes are currently designed, it's very difficult for the average citizen to know when to have meaningful input. They show up at a fiscal court meeting upset, they complain about things, and yet the time to have input on whatever it is they're complaining about was months or weeks ago, just because of the bureaucratic process. And so if you want to know when to have meaningful input, I try to shoot out those critical dates and times by email whenever I know them. That's fiscal court meetings, planning and zoning, boards and commissions, etc. All right, any questions before we get started? There's a handout that has this flowchart on it. I want you to look at this first. Most of the complaints that I get are around development and projects. People see the horse pasture next to them all of a sudden getting torn down. They wonder what's going on. It's the process, the time for you to have input is already passed. That farm is getting torn down and they're going to put a logistics warehouse there. But this process tells you when and how you can have meaningful input on projects in your area. First off, the way the process gets started is a landowner who owns land will submit an application to planning and zoning, which the other thing, by the way, it's called Boone County Planning and Zoning, but one thing you have to remember, it is not a county entity. Well, let me rephrase that. It's not a branch of county government. It is its own special, separate entity, independent of the county fiscal court. We receive what their recommendations are, but we have nothing to do with what they do. That's how it was formed back in the 60s. So planning and zoning receives an application from the applicant, the landowner usually, could be the developer, could be one of the local government entities actually. We can initiate it. The planning commission accepts that application as new business. The staff does an evaluation, does a report, and submits that report to the planning commission and during a public hearing. You'll usually see like this little white sign. It's about the size of a political yard sign. Very hard to read doing 45 down the road, but it's there out in front of the property, and that's the only notification you're going to get that somebody's trying to do something with a piece of land. That planning or public hearing is the most important time for you to show up and have input on a particular project. Anyone can do it. By email, phone call, or in person. In person is best. You write a letter to us. The public hearing is what establishes what's called the record on the record for that particular application. That record is the staff report, which is their full evaluation of the submittal by the applicant, and any public comment. So if it's going to look like there's 20 people for and there's 20 people against. That's the way the record is compiled. That public hearing will take any written feedback or oral feedback and make it part of the record. Then that public hearing goes to, or all that packet, the record that comes from the public hearing goes to a subcommittee. Planning Commission is 15 members, 6 appointed by Boone County, 6 appointed by Florence, 2 by Walton, and 1 by Union. All of that, how they operate and the makeup of that board is governed by a 60-year-old memorandum of understanding that has never been revised. So the subcommittee is made up of 5 members of the Planning Commission. Planning Commission hears the full public hearing, they listen to all the feedback, they look at the whole picture, and then they give it off to the Zone Change Committee, and the Zone Change Committee evaluates the concerns. Any concerns brought up by staff, and any concerns brought up by the citizens. They, within this Zone Change Committee hearing, which is public, they try to identify what can be done to fix or address those concerns. Sometimes the applicant will concede and do certain things, sometimes they won't. Whatever it is, they take all of that information and then they vote on a recommendation. A recommendation to accept or a recommendation to reject. That recommendation goes to the full Planning Commission, and all 15 members then vote to accept or reject the recommendation of the lower committee. If you are opposed to a project, and you go to the Zone Change Committee meeting and they vote 5-0 to agree with the applicant, it does not mean it's the end of the road. The full Planning Commission has on many times overturned the recommendation of the Zone Change Committee. It's better if you get like a 3-2 vote, or 3-2 vote or something like that, because that more likely they will overturn it. Goes to the full Planning Commission. The full Planning Commission is going to vote on that project to approve or reject based on the recommendation of the Zone Change Committee. You can have public input there, but it's usually limited to like 5 minutes for and 5 minutes against the project, and you can't introduce anything new. So if you found after the fact, after that initial public hearing, you found out that there's some Indian buried remains on the property or something, you can't bring that up. It's not part of the record. Or some endangered moth or whatever. So once the Planning Commission votes on it, it is to accept or reject, and they forward whatever their decision is to the legislative body. For the majority of the county, it's the fiscal court, Boone County Fiscal Court. If it's within Florence or Union or Walton, it goes to their legislative units. If it's half and half or partial somehow, in 2 different bodies, sometimes there's farm properties like that, they cross over 2 jurisdictions, both have to take action. So the fiscal court, let's just say for argument here, fiscal court then takes the record and has the opportunity, to hold their own public hearing. And we'll put a plug in on this one. I fought this one hard. Can't remember if you were at that meeting or not, but the interpretation of the existing fiscal court was that we don't have to or don't have the authority to do our own public hearing. But I worked with our county attorney, and we've now agreed that yes, we can hold a public hearing. So the fiscal court will now start holding public hearings. We have held one already. If the citizens want it, or if one of the commissioners want it. The nice thing about that is, when the recommendation of the Planning Commission comes to the fiscal court, we have to stick to the record. You can't bring up the endangered moth, or the fact that the lights from this industrial building are going to shine in your backyard. It's not part of the record. You can't even bring it up at the meeting. You're legally required to stick to the record. It's a quasi-judicial type process. But if we hold our own public hearing, we can then introduce new evidence. So if you think that there's more things that need to be introduced on a project or considered by the legislative unit, you can request a public hearing. Doesn't mean we grant it, request it. Then you can introduce more evidence on the record. The record then is expanded, and then the fiscal court or legislative unit will then take final action on that through 1 or 2 readings. It's an ordinance to do these kind of things usually. Ordinance is a law, resolution is just action. So the ordinance then changes the land use zoning, and because it's an ordinance, we have to have a first reading and a second reading. So public hearing, first reading, second reading, and then it becomes law. You can influence the fiscal court or legislative units to overturn a recommendation of the Planning Commission. So again, just because you didn't get the resolution you wanted, or the action you wanted from the planning commission doesn't mean it's the end of the world. You can still go up and fight it at the fiscal court level or legislative meeting level. So, kind of skipped ahead off a little bit, but planning commission votes, recommendation goes in the form of a resolution to the legislative unit. The fiscal court holds their first reading and then second reading. The first reading is technically the only time you get to have comment. We don't usually accept a lot of comment on the second reading, but we can, and there also is the opportunity for a public hearing. I conveniently gave you all of the contact information you need to blast everybody that makes decisions in Boone County on land use. The three commissioners, the judge executive, and the planning commission. If you want data or information on a particular project, you can find it in two ways. One I'll go over a little bit later on the GIS database, but the other is through an open records request. You ask me for the download link for all these files that I'll give you. There's a link right there to get to the open records. Any questions about process before we move on? The point of even bringing all this up is this is how you have meaningful input on projects, because once they're already breaking ground, it's too late. And I feel for everybody that's upset about that, but it's too late. This is the time to have input.
Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Just a question, because I know like when you see the sign out there for a zone change, when we do see that sign out there, I've done it, I called the town meeting right there sometimes. I actually came to the courthouse, talked to them, then they connected me with somebody, then they finally emailed me the project information. Just, I know it's easy, it's nice and transparent if they would just post on their website links to all this kind of stuff, but it seemed like it's held tightly, even before the meetings are out there. You know the meeting's coming up, but you still gotta wait and find that information.
Yeah. So, a couple things on that. One, we are working on a improved communication strategy and plan of how we communicate information like this at the county level. But the planning commission is separate from the county. We are working with them to try to get them to onboard these same things so that they are more open. It's hard to argue that they're not transparent because technically the data is available. It's just not easily accepted. That's the problem. So the way I'm articulating it is, today's generation, or most people today, are used to digesting information in 240 characters or less pushed to their device in their pocket. That's how they get information today. They don't go to websites, they don't click on links, they definitely don't click on multiple links to get somewhere. They don't go download files. That's just not the way people get information anymore. So we just have to rethink how we push information out to the public. That's not the answer you're looking for, but.
No, that's okay. Just to boost what you just said, I've been involved in here almost 5 years in Boone County. Lived in North Kentucky most of my life, but been involved in some of the big things going on in the Ridgewood area. People really works. I've been in some fiscal court meetings, planning and zoning meetings when they're packed, and very constructive comments being made, and I really believe they made a big difference in stopping a lot of growth and a lot of adverse changes. So.
Yeah, I think most of the people on the planning commission are, I don't know all, most or all the people on the planning commission, they're good people. Most of them, I think, are all from Boone County. And I don't want to question their intentions. But I will say that a significant number of them have been doing this for a very long time. So when we were back here 30 years ago, when we had a growth trajectory like this, the same people that were making decisions and thinking about planning in our county back then are still thinking about planning and making decisions today. And I think that a lot of them are so institutionalized at this point, they're really not sure how they're making decisions or what the impact is of the decisions. They've just been doing it for so long. I think there's a serious argument to be made for rethinking how we think about planning in the county, which includes communication.
Kentucky Works was Tuesday, right?
Correct.
What was the sales pitch there? Like you say, it's yet another approach to doing something. We've got all these other entities already set up. The argument for this is why this might be something we want to seriously consider.
The argument was that The primary argument for supporting it was that it's not a special purpose government entity, but most of the organizations are not. And that one other organization was going away, this was just gonna basically be rethinking that and creating a new name, et cetera, for it. I don't fully buy that argument, myself, and that, hey, we're just gonna create a new organization. And the main thing was, why do we have all these other ones if they're not doing anything? It was more about calling out the fact that one of these other organizations really needs to step up to the plate. I didn't really articulate many arguments against it on Tuesday because I already knew Judge Moore had the votes, and I'd already explained myself in the previous meeting, so.
Yeah, that sounds similar to, I followed the TIV, deal with that. And the question was, why can't we already solve these problems? Why do we need to go to this new sort of bureaucratic approach? Why can't we, as commissioners, do this? You're saying similarly, if you're gonna tell me I'm talking words, what about all those guys over there? Can someone else do this?
Yeah, I don't remember what the question exactly was, but, my main argument is just that we already have all these other entities. I'm small government, not big government. I think our tendency is at local levels to just create more government for no reason. And actually, I know why the reason is. It's because the politician that's actually responsible to the people, that's accountable at the ballot box, wants to have some way of being able to say, well, that's not my decision, that's the planning commission's decision, or that's the TID's decision. Now, I will say on the TID though, that we did get some concessions on that I think are very good. So I'm not happier with what we have today than what was originally presented. Some of the concessions were the legislation that was approved in 2022 that allowed for the formation of a TID, used slightly different language than other legislation allowing the formation of other SPGs. So my interpretation of it, concurred by the county attorney, was that it actually allowed the commissioners the opportunity to appoint board members rather than all board appointments coming from the executive branch or the judge executive. So that's different, but it's because the wording of the legislation was a little bit different. Normally, the executive branch does all nomination appointments. So in that sense, each of 3 commissioners were able to get one of our people on the board, or one of our recommendations, I guess, and the judge executive has 2. The other thing we were able to get was the fiscal court has direct approval of the also I'm drawing a mental blank, whatever their documents that form their bylaws. So the bylaws that they follow as an organization, as an entity, we approve them, and we can line item correct that if we want to. So that was good.
Is this TIV permanent? Or how long is it in effect?
It is in effect until it's terminated.
By-
So the fiscal court.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Or process? Yes, sir.
Is there a process to dissolve the TID? Because one of the criticisms when Adam Elam did his ghost government study of special government entities back in the politically correct term, special district. And one of the criticisms that he leveled at the special purpose government entities was that there was no process for dissolving them once their functionality was obsolete or complete. And so my question to you is say for example, after a couple of years, I mean, if this TID is going to be so beneficial for our infrastructure, I mean, is there a way of evaluating the performance of this TID, its usefulness, and if it's not useful, do we have a meaningful way to roll it back?
So part of its termination, the termination procedure would theoretically be outlined in their bylaws, but a simple vote by the fiscal court majority would theoretically terminate it. Could be challenged legally, but theoretically that would terminate it. At least that's also how it was sold to us. So, and yes, we will evaluate it in a few years and see, or whatever. There's no real budget for it or anything like that, so we don't, it's not a budget line item in our county budget. So, all right, a couple other things here real quick. We're gonna go over these projects. If you guys have never been to the county GIS website, I highly recommend you do this. It's better on a computer than a phone, but there's a lot of data in this site, in this system, about every single property in the county. So if there has been, you wanna know what's going on in that farm, what happened in the past, and what's gonna happen in the future, you can go to that parcel of land, you can click on it, make sure that under filters that you have, there's a map layer filter on the right that you select, planning and zoning, and you get all the documentation on record for that's public record is there. So you don't even actually have to submit an open records request. So keep that in mind. I go to this every single day. You want to take a picture of that QR code, you can access it later, or that website. It should be all in the documentation we provided you. All right, so let's talk about some specific projects. Last year we did this, so a couple of these projects are still out there and not a lot has changed. What we're going to look at is there's a project list. You have a piece of paper, should have Hebron projects on there. It actually might say April 2023 on top, but that's just a mistake. Does it? Yeah, that was a mistake. Copy from last year. So Air Park Logistics, these are correspond to a number on the map. There should be multiple pages there. Air Park Logistics, number 1, at the bottom. This is the same as last year. It's a CBG 7 site. Robles, the developer, was approved back in 2020. Nothing else has changed since last year, and nothing has happened as far as I know. And again, I'm going to hit some of these projects at a high level. If you have any specific questions, ask me. I'm not going to go into every detail about it. Some of these projects are 600-700 pages long, but I have all the detailed files on this available to send you right now if you want any more information on it. Number 2, Bullock Lane. Again, same as last year, was rezoned to I-1 industrial. Bullock Lane between 20 and 11. And my understanding is the long necks there's another long neck somewhere out here I've never seen before. Yeah, so they're there. That was the way. We were looking for one. That's what it was. Number 4, Williams Road Apartments. So this one was part of the original Graves Road plan. It's really the same as last year. Nothing's really changed. Site plan's been approved. I think they're still waiting for sewer, so they don't have sewer access there, which they need for apartments. Actually, it was on my to-do list to call SD1 and find out kind of what the status was of that, but I didn't have time to do it before this. So if anybody really wants to know about timing on that one, it's going to be driven by SD1 sewer connection. If you really want to know about that, just let me know, and I'll follow up and get that info to you.